Hey, welcome to class. We're coming into Information Security Part 2. This is another semester of information for you to become a better programmer in a secure environment. So let's talk about the issues that are coming up in Part 2. In Unit 1, we're going to talk about data privacy. So that's with ads and things with your companies that are trying to make you the product. In Part 2, we'll talk about risk, which is all about disaster recovery and quantifying the problems that are out there ready to get you. In Part 3, we'll talk about legal issues. So the laws of data privacy are still in flux, and the United States is trying to figure out how it's going to work. And number 4, we're going to talk about exploits. And so how people can find vulnerabilities and exploit them, and then after they know what they are, what do we do with them? Is the legal requirement that you should reveal them, or does the government keep them? It's a weapon, really, that we can use if we retain it, and it's a security patch if we reveal it. So exploits is that unit. The next unit, number 5, is about network security. And so in this, we will talk about how to kick somebody off the network and capture the login information as they join a Wi-Fi network. We'll talk about cell phones and why they can be vulnerable. And so all the things about network security. Then we'll talk about cyber warfare. And so in this case, we will look at the stuxnet virus, which is really the first of its kind, a piece of software that caused physical damage in the world. And so the policies there are enormous and the consequences as well. And then we'll talk about trusts. So this refers to our communications and our transactions and the tools such as Bitcoin and how they are used to make us trust each other. So let's look at the details of each unit that we're going to study. In topic 1, in data privacy, we will look at tools that help us follow our digital footprints. So what does your browser reveal about you? What is Google searching on you? What do the ads and the things that are running on websites really collect? You are the product. The privacy in ads is really the big issue. And so this is always something that Congress is shouting about, whether it's Mark Zuckerberg in front of Congress or whether it's Google and their privacy issues. And Europe has their own slant on how they want to handle things. The United States is different. So privacy and advertisement is a big deal. And if you're just getting into the information technology field, these are issues that you will hopefully have input on as you progress through your career. We'll look at the history of credit reports because, as you know, Equifax was a massive hack, and all this data that was collected on you was not really anything that you maybe even knew was out there and was a database that had personal information about you. So credit reports is a big deal and how it relates to data privacy. And then finally, on your job, your work is likely tracking a lot of things. And so we'll look at some extreme examples such as the UPS company that tracks every movement of their workers and every second of their day. And so how does that relate to the job that you do? Does it make you more secure? Does it make you a happier employee? Does it make you more efficient? Or does it just make you scared? So data worker privacy is up there. Now in topic 2, we'll talk about risk. So the idea of downtime is a horrible nightmare for any business manager. It's expensive. And so we'll talk about the cost of downtime and how you can justify almost any IT project if you can just say it will reduce downtime. And then we're going to talk about how to quantify risk. And so you could say that, a flood is a disaster. How likely is it? So some strategies on how to provide your boss with numbers that he could use or she could analyze to figure out if a decision is going to be worth the money or not. So quantifying the risk and the results of a disaster if they should occur. Then finally, we'll talk about disaster recovery. So what are the tools that businesses use to keep going? We want to have a business interruption plan so that we don't go bankrupt and you get to keep your job and the products keep rolling. So this is a huge category. People have whole careers on risk management, and you should know something about this if you want to know about information security. Now there are legal fights of data. So there are lots of laws and lots of policies, and there's gray areas. What have the courts said about our legal system? So we're going to use 2 case examples for most of these questions. So this is not a law class, this is an information security class, and so we're going to look at it from that perspective. But we'll start with Snowden. Edward Snowden in 2013 with his revelations of what the NSA was doing. And so you might know the story. Snowden is currently living as a refugee, you might say, or he's on the run. He's living in Russia. And the United States prosecution would really, really like to put him on trial for what they consider as traitor. Then we're going to talk about Apple. It seems like every few years the Apple and the FBI conflict rears up its head again. And so cases where the United States government says, we demand a backdoor into all the communications of your customers. And so far, Apple has been on the front line to say, absolutely not. We cannot compromise security by providing law enforcement a backdoor. And so, what's your opinion? This is certainly an issue that's in flux, both of these. Should the government spy on us? And should the government have a backdoor on us? And so there's some strong opinions on both sides. We'll talk about vulnerabilities and exploits in the next unit. So we'll look at some interesting tools of how you can find a vulnerability in a piece of software. So we're thinking about how you could hack into, let's say, the Chrome web browser. And if you had an exploit that was able to open up a security flaw, then that would be valuable information. So since it is valuable, do you get paid by the company that has the product, such as Google and Chrome? Or do you sell it to the government? Or does the government find it on their own? Do you sell it to the North Koreans? Do you sell it to drug lords? What do you do once you have a vulnerability that nobody else knows about? It's really an ethical question. And then finally, should the United States government itself retain this information and use it in their war chest as cyber weapons? Or should they report it? So should they tell Cisco that their routers are broken? Should they tell Microsoft that their operating system has a gaping hole in it? Or do they just retain that as a secret tool in their spy chest? What's the question? What should they do? And then let's go into another subject. Let's go to how you can use Google as a hacking tool. So it is amazing what you can find. You can find people's social security numbers, credit cards. You can find free software. You can find passwords. And you don't have to get into any of these computers that have these information. Google has it, and they've indexed it. And so Google hacking is a system of just custom searches. And we'll show you how to use it. And then, of course, the question is, should you use it? Then we'll talk about the consumer fraud. I think it's Access Act or something like that, the CFAA, is really the broad law that would make you think twice about doing Google hacking or finding vulnerabilities and breaking into systems. So what's the legal consequences for finding and exploiting software? So in number 5, in Unit 5, we'll talk about network security. And so we will see how to do a deauth, which is a way to kick somebody off the network. We'll use the tool called Wireshark so that we can look at the packets that are flowing past us and maybe find some information that we shouldn't be looking at. And then we could, for instance, capture somebody's login credentials when they join a Wi-Fi network. And even if they are encrypted, we might be able to find tools that could hack that password. And so you could, from a distance, get somebody's authentication on their Wi-Fi network and break into their system. Also, we'll look at networks as they relate to phones. So there are vulnerabilities on cell phones as well. Then we'll join topic number 6, which is about cyber warfare. So some people might call this an exciting new field, others would call it an exciting new threat. But we'll look back at what the governments have done with this virus called stuxnet. Really, it stands alone as the first cyber weapon that would cause physical damage in the real world. So stuxnet was a virus that was targeting centrifuges in a uranium enrichment plant in the country of Iran. Then we'll talk about malware analysis. And we'll actually look at a report that shows the process of dissecting a piece of code and figuring out what it does, even if you don't have the source code. So a reverse engineering process, a pattern of looking at what it does, and you can find out a lot of digital fingerprints in the code if you know what you're looking for. And then we'll talk about robotic warfare, another exciting new field where we can kill you with a machine even better than we did before. So artificial intelligence, robots that are stronger and faster and trickier than ever. So it's a scary future if you think about what the governments could do with their abilities in technology. In topic 7, we'll finish off with the question of how can I trust you? And so we'll look at blockchain. Blockchain is this great technology that is looking for a solution. But really, what is it? How does it work? And so we'll do some programming here to figure out how simple it is, really. It's just a hashing algorithm to let people know that, yes, the transaction that you gave me is true. And then we'll look at spam filters. So when you get email, you generally trust who's sending it to you. Wasn't always the case. There was a time many years ago where spam was just a plague on people's inboxes. And so spam filters have done a great job so far in reducing the number of emails that we get that we don't want. And if only the phone companies would do the same thing with their phone calls. So how can I trust you is number 7. So here is the summary of what we're going to study this semester. So we'll talk about data privacy, we'll talk about risk and disaster recovery, legal issues that relate to privacy, we'll talk about exploits and finding vulnerabilities and what to do with them afterwards. We'll do some network security issues, we'll talk about cyber warfare and what's been done and what will be done, and then finally the word trust with Bitcoin and filtering out communications so that we can trust what we're reading. So this will be an exciting semester. More information security, part 2. Let's get started.